Howdy, welcome to the Wordsmith's Forge. I am Matthew J. Coran. Contrary to my last video, which was like 6 months ago now, I decided to take a little bit before I got into this series that I've been wanting to do for a while, which is basically a part-by-part scrutiny of my own book, in that talking about the different concepts that I introduce in there. Because I think that these concepts in and of themselves are just fun to talk about. And even though, it's covered in the story, there's always more to discuss. That's why people do book clubs and things like that. So this is kind of like an online book club where you have the author himself talking about the things he writes about. And I'm not going to kill all the mystery, but some of these topics have a lot to offer, including the one I'm about to go over, which is covering the first 2 chapters, the concept of reaping what you sow, which is commonly known as a very biblical concept, and for good reason. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 20, Jesus says, "Therefore by your fruits you will know them." And so going through the first couple chapters of the book, that's exactly how the character Sim is introduced. We immediately see the fruits of his labor. And not only his labor, but his father's before him, right? Because his father is the one who taught him everything he knew about gardening. And he even taught him that famous saying, if you only sow a little, you'll reap a little, but if you sow in abundance, you will reap in abundance, which was originally written by the Apostle Paul. And so the concept of reaping and sowing can be traced back to the very beginnings of mankind, right? In Genesis, literally, mankind was created to tame the earth, to subdue the earth, replenish the earth. And mankind's beginnings were in a garden. Because the very nature of man is to, or the very function of man, I should say, like what we were designed for, was to bring order to chaos. Like you see the chaos of nature, which is interesting because nature is ordered in its own particular way. But when it comes to agriculture and gardening, when you see plants in the wild, like take berries for example, like wild raspberries versus farmed raspberries, there's quite a difference in size and the amount they produce, right? Because there's, in just wild nature, there's all sorts of plants growing, whether it's the berries, whether it's like all these weeds, thorns, thistle, like all different kinds of stuff. And so we as the gardeners will separate the weeds from the things we want, right? Like we want the fruit, we want the sweet tasting stuff, we want the things that nourish us. And so through agriculture, we separate the chaotic elements of nature, right? The thorns and thistles and everything else that don't serve us, and we order our garden in a way that replenishes us, where we're able to reap in abundance that which we need. And even though all of mankind started out as gardeners, it doesn't mean we're all meant to be gardeners, right? Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool to have a homestead and everything, even if it's just as a hobby, because you get to grow a little bit of your own food. And, if you actually are concerned about the environment and you want to do something, there's no better way than to actually do things yourself and invest in your own agriculture, your own resources. There's so many lawns that don't have anything growing on them except grass, and you can easily change that if you have a lawn and time. But I digress. We're not all meant to be gardeners. A lot of us have been born with certain gifts and certain resources and certain circumstances that allow us to structure our own metaphorical gardens in our own way, right? Whether you're a gardener, an electrician, a greeter at Walmart, we all have a role to play. And we all have the ability to play that role well. And in doing so, we sow the seeds of our own success and success of our community at large. Right? We have, like, for example, an electrician who's really good at understanding the flow of electricity, how it applies to different appliances, how to run conduits in a way that's very orderly. Everything that goes into how to be a good electrician. It's like in everything that you do, you have the ability to bring greater order to it, right? Like there's a way where you can lay out your wires where it's really neat, very simple, easy to get to, safe. How you lay out your wires is very important in terms of safety, and how you terminate them so then you don't create a fire hazard due to a short or anything else. I know that from personal experience, but you have a way of ordering things in a way where they work well and they produce good effects to those you're servicing, right? Whether it's, working on someone's house or a commercial building, you doing your job well is a fruit that benefits other people, right? It keeps the lights on. That's your fruit. Keeps the refrigerator running. Keeps your toilet running. Keeps all of your electrical equipment running. So that in and of itself is a fruit. It's something that sustains our culture, our community, in a way that isn't necessarily obvious to everyone, but it is. It is a way of sustaining us. Same thing with literally being like a janitor. Nobody thinks about the janitor job because when they're around, the janitor typically isn't working. They wait until everyone's gone, they start cleaning up. But every day you come back and it's a nice clean floor, your garbage mysteriously disappears, like there isn't just dust everywhere. Like that requires someone to put in efforts to make something neat and orderly. So it's the nature of man to bring order to things that would otherwise be chaotic. And it's something that God requires all of us to do, from the very beginning. God, I wouldn't say he cursed Adam, but it was the curse of Adam due to his own sin that he now has to labor. By the sweat of his brow, he shall eat the fruit of the earth, and it's something that you can't really escape, which is why we see so much depression nowadays, because everything's so easy that people don't have to work as hard as they used to, right? Like you can afford to have a job where you sit around most of the day and it doesn't necessarily feel like you're doing anything. Like if you're just organizing Excel sheets or something and that's your job, like you can feel like you're not contributing. You can be in some way, it's not always obvious to see, but this is what happens when you divorce your purpose from your work, right? Like you want to have your work be purposeful, like to understand why you're doing what you're doing, because that's what gets you through it, right? You have a mission. like for example, like personally, I have my, like I do what I do in the author world, like I write books and I just talk about things I find interesting. And that's part of my job, not necessarily in that it makes me a whole lot of money, but it's something that I feel called to do. It's something that I feel like I have a purpose for, you know. But I also have my day job, I'm an engineer. And it's like I can't say that I find every aspect of my job glamorous and just full of purpose, but in the end it is, even if it's not for the people I'm directly working for, whether it's my clients or what have you, like whether it's like paperwork, documentation. I mean, it does help them, but even if that's not enough of a motivation for you, it also helps you because think about your obligations as a person, right? Especially as a man, when you have to provide for your household. Like I have a family I have to provide for, and that's one of my top obligations. My first and foremost obligation is to God. But within that framework, I have an obligation to protect and provide for my family. And this job allows me to do that in a very productive way. Like my job pays the bills, buys the food, everything my family needs materially, that job can provide. So in a sense, even if you really don't like, even if you're not really that enthused about what you're doing all the time, you can at least know that what you're doing is serving a purpose in your own life, you know? And so just understanding purpose and how it relates to the fruits, like what you sow and the fruits you hope to reap, it makes it a lot easier to bear that burden. And so looking at Sim's history with his father, you know, Sim's fruits were obviously his garden. What were his father's fruits? Because we read about how much he served his community, how he lobbied for the economic support of the Taran farmers, and he even gave respect to the law as he did so. But in the end, everything was taken from him, right? Like he didn't have any of his material fruits. He couldn't even be with his family. He was literally taken from his family. And so someone might ask, well, what's the point of doing that then if you don't even get to see, like if you don't even get to reap any fruit? And that's where charity comes into play. You do things not for your own sake, but for the sake of God, for what is good. Because Wyatt wasn't able to enjoy any of the fruits of his labor. And in a lot of ways, he was taken away from, not just in a lot of ways, he was taken away from the people he was directly meant to protect and provide for. But was it for nothing? No. You can see right off the bat how much Wyatt's actions influenced his own son, how much he inspired him, right? Like, one thing I got into the habit of during 2020 and COVID was I bought a few fruit trees. A lot of people did this. In fact, I was talking to the person running the nursery. They said like during 2020 business was insane because everyone wanted an orchard all of a sudden. But my mentality was I want to plant some trees even if I'm not around to enjoy them because someone can, right? Like get into the habit of planting trees whose fruits you might never see. Because you want to talk about like saving the planet or like how to make the world a better place. And it all starts with doing things for other reasons than for yourself. It all starts with charity, doing things because they're good, right? Because the kind of self-serving attitude is, and like it's so short-sighted, it's what leads to all this inefficiency, all this waste and all of the corruption you see today because everyone's out for themselves, and they think in in the short term it might benefit them. You know, they can get a lot of money, but in the long term, you know, their children see their actions and they don't respect their parents, or they continue to act corrupt. They continue to uh, serve themselves, and overall people suffer because of that. You know, it's short-sighted, and it's contrary to how we're meant to operate. But doing good acts for one another purely for the good of it creates a ripple effect where you don't know how that's going to affect people downstream. Wyatt's actions affected Sim in a way that Wyatt couldn't have predicted, especially because he wasn't even there for it, right? Like, this was years and years ago. But because of that, Sim reaped in abundance. Because Wyatt sowed in abundance, Sim reaped in abundance, and his garden became the staple, like a crown jewel of his village. You know, he brings in a lot of business because people hear about his amazing garden, and it's like a rising tide that lifts all the ships. You know, so it's like a lot of people operate in a zero sum game in this world where it's like, if you do good, it must be at the cost of someone else. But that's an illusion. It's not reality. You can do good in a way where it also elevates other people. And sometimes it'll elevate people even higher than you are elevated, which is totally fine because it's not about you. It's about doing what is good. So that's all I have really to talk about today for that first section. Like I said, I covered the first 2 chapters, and I'll cover the next few chapters here later on this week, God willing. And yeah, I'm working hard on book 2. I had to take a little bit of a hiatus because I've been going through a lot of changes in my own life with my family growing, thank God, and for growing responsibilities in my everyday work. But it's all good, and I'm grateful for all of it. And I hope that during this time, everyone who's watching this is also growing in their own way and doing more of what God calls them to do. And yeah, if you want to support my work, you can click the links below. You can follow me on social media. I'm going to be doing some maintenance work on my website, so my website will be down for a bit. But in the meantime, you can always find my work on Amazon. Heir to Song and Sword, book 1 is out. Book 2 will soon be underway. I'm already writing a lot of chapters, and soon I will be calling out to beta readers to help me fine-tune all the bits and pieces of the story. And I'm looking forward. I really enjoyed my interactions with my beta readers on book 1. They were wonderful people, and they had a lot to offer, and I'm even more optimistic for book 2. So if you've been a beta reader already and would like to contribute, you are more than welcome to, and I think you'll appreciate the changes I'm making down the pipeline here, just in terms of how I have things structured. And if you haven't been a beta reader but would be interested, you can reach out to me on social media, and we'll be in touch. And until next time, take care and God bless.